Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to Greg Neese and my weekly What's This Bird Roundup. We're here live in the Facebook What's This Bird group, also on YouTube and on Twitter, to talk about birds, birding, bird ID. We've got a lot of stuff that we have seen in the What's This Bird group for the last few days or so. It seems like a lot of people are seeing the same sorts of birds and having the same sorts of problems. So we're going to tackle a few of those today. But before we get going, Greg, how you doing?
Good, 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 good.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah,
you're
staying
frozen.
inside.
Hold on just a second.
I'm frozen.
Yeah, I know what the problem is. All right, go ahead.
Am
Restart.
I
You're
unfrozen?
good. You're unfrozen.
Right on. Um, I'm good. Staying inside and looking at. I did sit out in the backyard a couple of days when we had some south winds. Got my first of the year chimney swift.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
on the 28th, which is pretty much the day that I get my first chimney swift every
That's
year.
cool.
Within pretty much within 36 hours.
Yeah,
Uh, and yeah, it's everything's going smooth here. Migration has definitely started.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, we're getting a lot of that here. Even just walking around my neighborhood, I've had American red starts singing from some kind of standy, older trees, and then I had a Blackpool, my first Blackpool Warbler of the year the other day was singing, so
Now
they'll
it
be
is
on
it's
their way
funny
to
how
you soon.
Blackpoll is one of those birds we think of as a later migrant,
Yeah,
but there's always a few that show up way before the others.
yeah, and it seems like
And
every year I feel like I'm surprised by that, and I really shouldn't be at a
uh,
certain point.
they just do, and then they disappear for like a week, 2 weeks, and
Yeah,
then they're everywhere.
and they're everywhere.
Um, And when I say migration has is really started, what I mean is the the big boom has
Right,
started,
right. Yeah,
and
migration's been going on for months now.
months now, right? But this is the big finale is just getting ready, or just happening, and it's really fun every year, because we see people who started birding in the winter or in the fall,
Yes.
and this is their first spring migration, and
Yeah.
things like, yeah, they're familiar with this with birds like yellow-rumped warbler by this point, but
Hmm.
then they see one, a male in full spring plumage. It's like, whoa.
Wait a minute. Where did
Yeah,
these come
no, and
from?
I love
Yeah.
I love seeing that every year.
Yeah, yeah, it is neat to see that happen. And this year it seems like there's more than ever. I think a lot of people are staying at home. Well, you should be staying at home and paying
Yes.
attention to the things that are going on around you, and things like when a rose-breasted grosbeak shows up at your feeder for the first time. That is a very wow moment. And I say rose-breasted here because I'm on the East Coast,
Yeah.
but our friends out west, it's the same with black-headed grosbeak. Just as
Yeah.
spectacular, just as amazing, just as seemingly unlikely when they show up at your feeder and you've had weeks of cardinals and chickadees and whatnot. Well, not in the West, obviously. I'm showing too much East Coast bias here all of a
Yep.
sudden, Greg. But we do have a lot of really good birds to show people. And it seems like a lot of folks have been having questions lately about Catharus thrushes. And by that, if you're not familiar with the scientific name, those are your Hermit Thrushes, your Veery, your Swensons, and your gray cheek thrush. We're not even going to talk about Bicknells. That's too much to go into now, and I wish I had the confidence to call a Bicknell's thrush a non-vocalizing Bicknell's thrush in migration, but I don't.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
a lot of people have had questions about those. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I know like maybe 3, 4 people I would trust with that ID.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe actually, when you really think about it, maybe one or two.
Yeah. And Greg, I just got your message. I'm going to send you that PDF that has the stuff that I'm going to get
Yeah.
you. I'm sending that your way right now, so you can get on on track. Just give me a second here.
Yeah. So what's happening there is that I can't, because of the delay, I can't see what's happening on the screen while I'm talking about it. So what Nate is doing is giving me some material back channel so that I can see what he's talking about.
Yeah, and that's
Um, so we got some people popping in here watching us. Hi to Dan Laurie and Joel Greenberg, Colin Dobson,
hey, Chicago
Sue Frisha.
guys, Chicago
Yeah,
folks.
well, I shared this in the Illinois Birding Network.
Yeah, hold on. Just I don't know why it's taking so long to. All right. Bear with me here. Yeah, and if you have any questions about birds in the comments, we don't have too many comments coming in today. Usually we're a little bit better, a little further along on there. But if you have any
Yeah.
questions about bird ID, any strange thing that you've been seeing, you can throw your photo up in the comments if you like. We'd be happy to take a
Yep.
look at it there. It might be easier. We can even grab it and put it in our thing. And I am still working on getting you that image, Greg, and I will get it as soon as I stop talking and can focus on more than one thing at a time.
Yeah, and those of you in the Illinois group, hi to all of you who are waving. Um, just drop your questions in the comments, and we'll see. I'll see them, and we'll respond to them.
Sorry, it downloaded it to a folder I'm not used to, and that's the reason why. You know how that is. It's in downloads.
So yeah, the we had some fun weather here in the Great Lakes. We had some nice spring weather um, that brought in some birds, and then now we've had 2 days of rain and north winds and cold, and I mean, in the Great Lakes we have 12 seasons each year, and spring is kind of gets underway around July. It's pretty much just kind of like steel gray October and sleeting until the end of May.
Yeah, around here we had a pretty large
There we
storm
go.
system
All
go
right, now we're
through,
all set.
and a few days ago, but we've been pretty clear for the most part through there. We do have a couple questions, and let's take those before we start throwing into the PowerPoint presentation here, Greg. Lee Stanley asks, he seems like you've had a much larger number of rose-breasted grosbeaks in Georgia this year than in years past. What are your thoughts? My thoughts is that you're probably about the same number of rose-breasted grosbeaks, except you've got more people staying at home watching their feeders and noticing them. That's my suspicion. Rose-breasted
Yeah.
grosbeak is one of those birds, at least where I live in the southeast, where you could, if you watching them come to your feeders, like you could very easily miss them. Like they'll come one day, they'll gorge on your black oil sunflower seeds, and then they'll take off. And most of the time, this will happen when you're at work or you're not paying attention. Now that everyone's at home and watching their feeders because they miss that drama that they can't get from live TV or sports anymore, you're going to be seeing those rose-breasted grosbeaks, and they're going to be showing up. So, yeah, it's
Yep.
great. Enjoy them. They're fantastic. I don't have mine yet this year. I imagine I probably will if I go out and take a walk. We've had a bunch of migrants come through in the last couple of days. If I go out and take a walk this afternoon, I might be able to hear one somewhere around. And
Yeah. A- ABA Young Birder of the Year, Gracie McMahon is in our group. Says hi to all of us. Hi,
hello,
Gracie.
hello.
Um, Stacy Iwanicki asks about Brewers and Rusty Blackbirds. We don't have that
That's a
one
tough one.
queued up.
No. Do you have an image for that, Greg?
And I don't.
That's all right. That's all right. It's
I
fine.
don't have one handy. Um, but basically, especially this time of year, rusty blackbirds are going to show rusty colored plumage on
A little
them.
bit.
If they're anything but a male in ready to go breeding plumage. And the way that they acquire the plumage, the rusty on the male rusty blackbirds is fringing on on the ends of the feathers, and it wears off. And then they're just not quite as lustrous and purple as Brewers Blackbirds. It's kind of a more of a satiny matte black. There's also differences in the bill shape and the way they present themselves. I mean, Brewers Blackbird is kind of a it struts, and it's got more of a presence.
I think that's
It's the
probably true,
it's
and
the
they tend to be in places that are a little more open too. I think of
exactly.
especially this time of year, Brewer's Blackbird is like a bird of, like a cattle, like a muddy ditch cattle ditch. Like the place where the cows walk around when they're feeding most of the time. And is where Rusty Blackbird is going to be a little more secretive, a little more in those kind of seeps, wet
Yep.
areas. With a lot of woods and stuff, kind of, because they're one of the classic Rusty Blackbird characteristics. Their behaviors is that they kind of like walk real slowly along the edges of those still water and like flip over leaves and stuff with their bills.
Yep.
But they're going to be a little more secretive. If I'm seeing it out in the open, it's going to be a Brewers unless I've got a good reason to think otherwise.
And female brewers are quite gray and
Oh yeah.
actually are more and have dark eyes
Hmm.
and are more usually and are more most people confuse Brewers Blackbird with brown-headed cowbird than they do rusty,
Yeah, I would say that's
especially at
probably
this time
accurate.
of year.
Yeah, yeah, real good. Michael James Krause has a question. When will migration end this year? Boy, migration never stops. It's always going
In some
on.
ways, that's true. That's
Yeah,
true. I
there's
think
always
there's
something moving.
uh, yeah, yeah, that is true. I mean, it's you get maybe a little bit of a break in June,
Hmm.
and then by July, the first shorebirds that made it north are already
Are
turning
starting to head
around and
back.
heading back south again.
Yeah, and so when I think of spring migration in particular, and I'm thinking of like late migrants, things like in the east part, at least where in the eastern half of the continent, western half's a little bit different, but things like willow flycatcher and morning warbler and Connecticut warbler, those tend to be the last of the birds to kind of move up north, and I've seen migrant willow flycatchers as late as like the first week of June. So they're still,
Yeah.
moving up and finding their places even that late. Most of the big push of migration is going to be pretty over by the third week of May in across most of the continent. But there's still things kind of
Yeah.
straggling, moving through. But this big push, this what we think of when we think of migration, which is the thrushes and the warblers and the vireos and the grosbeaks and all the kind
Well,
of fancy neotropic migrants, is late April to mid May is kind of
yeah.
the real big movement.
I mean, the South is hitting it hard right now, from
Yeah, we're right
Florida
in a
to the
peak time.
Texas,
Yeah,
Florida to Texas. This is it.
this
You're
is
getting
it.
your peak right now, and then
Exactly.
up around the Great Lakes, May 15th
Hmm.
is the peak, and then go from there.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly. And then, as Greg said, by the end of June, a lot of those shorebirds that are, breeding in the Arctic, taking advantage of that 24 hours of daylight up there at the top of the continent, are the chicks are out. They're kind of on their own, and the adults and even the non, the non-breeders who may not have even gone up there in the first place, but the adults are
true.
starting to come back down by the end of June, which is crazy. I mean, there's
And,
always something moving.
and one interesting thing about the shorebirds, is that most shorebirds do not care for their young at all.
Yeah,
And it's kind of an
very
interesting
minimal.
it's kind of an interesting thing when you think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
they drop their eggs when the young hatch. They hang around the nest for a few days and then they're gone. Yeah, and that's not true of every single one, but a lot of them.
Hmm.
Uh, and you have to wonder, like, how do these birds that are just left completely alone in the Arctic find these? I mean, these birds wind up migrating to very specific locations, and
Hmm.
they find their way. They know where to go.
Yeah. 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 It's pretty crazy. And then, when we think of, traditional peak of shorebird migration in August and September, those are mostly those young birds who have finally figured it out, who haven't been eaten by Arctic foxes and Jaegers, and are
Yep.
making their way back down, which is why the bulk of young shorebirds are coming in much later in the summer, whereas the adults are heading back very quickly. All right, so shall we talk some thrushes, Greg?
Sure. Sure. We've got a question that I'll get back to from Tommy Goodwin. I just wanted to let Tommy know that we saw the question. We'll get back to you in a minute.
Absolutely. Yep. All right.
So
So this is a bird that was thrown up on What's This Bird right now. A lot of people are seeing Catharus thrushes migrating through their part of the continent right now. This is peak migration of Catharus thrushes along with everything else. So things like especially Veery and Swansons are moving in big numbers right now. So a lot of people are seeing them. However, this bird threw a little bit of a curveball to people, including me. So I'm kind of happy that I didn't weigh in on it because I think I probably would have gotten this one wrong. What are you looking at, Greg?
okay, so um, the first thing we see is that this bird has what seems to be a fairly well-defined eye ring,
Mm,
even spectacles, and a first impression would be Swenson's thrush.
that would be my
They
impression
can,
if I were scrolling through the What's This Bird group,
Yeah.
and that thing popped up.
But there's a couple things to note about this picture. Um, and one is that it's overexposed and the highlights are blown out. So if you move on to the next image,
I
I
will do
can't
that.
see it, so let me know when you pop that one up.
I popped it up.
Okay, so in the middle, I've very quickly just brought down the highlights so that we can see what's happening in the back. And that's the middle image there. And we can see
Mm-hmm.
the rusty tail. We can see some rusty color in the wings. Um,
You sure
but
can.
most, but most importantly, look right here at the back of the auricular and what you might call the jawline.
Yeah,
Um,
the cheek,
now
the ear.
look at the
Yeah.
Swanson's thrush on the right. It's got that buffy face.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that Swainson's thrush, that Hermit thrush will never show, is
Yeah.
that buffy face, and Swainson's always does.
Very good.
Um, and another thing to remember too is Swainson's thrush. Look at the wing panel and how it's olive, and the back is
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
a flat olive. Um, and remember that when these birds were given their names early on, it was scientists holding skins in their hands and laying them out on a table. And this bird's name was olive-backed thrush.
Mm-hmm.
And when laying on a table of hermits and other thrushes, this bird has a very olive back compared to a hermit thrush.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a bird that was taken in St. Charles, Missouri, which is near St. Louis. Yeah. So there are still hermit thrushes hanging around. I mean, we're getting to the end of hermit thrushes. Most of the hermit thrushes have taken off and are heading to the far boreal forest to breed. But there are still a few of them around, and they can still cause some problems. Most of the time, you're going to see that red, as you can see in the middle image that Greg has created here. You can see the red pop a little bit more. But yeah, goes to show that sometimes you can be fooled by the lighting and the camera, what the
Oh well,
camera does. Yeah.
and thrushes are just not all that easy. I mean,
Yeah.
even when you've been doing this for years and years, it's just they're not that easy.
Yeah.
Well, except wood thrush.
Wood
Wood
thrush,
thrush is
which
pretty
is not a
darn easy.
Catharus thrush, though.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, so it's in a different genus. They're bigger, they're pot-bellied, they have a ton of spots all up and down the front
Well,
and
and
underneath of them.
they have this beautiful, very fine face pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting when you get into birding beyond your backyard, you start collecting bird books. It just happens,
Yeah.
and eventually you're going to start picking up bird books from places beyond where you would normally go to places you would wish to go.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start doing that, you see that families like thrushes exist all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
and you start seeing birds that like missile thrush or Naumann's thrush,
Yeah.
which are just these spectacular patterns, and you're like, wow, that is so awesome. I'd love to see that. But then people in Europe, they think that about our wood thrush. The wood thrush is just
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful bird.
It
Anyway,
is. I had a couple of them in the woods behind my house about 5 days ago, and it surprised me because I didn't entirely expect. Wood thrush is one of those species that it actually is declining pretty precipitously these days, especially in the east. And they're not super common breeders in my part of the state, though there are certainly more of them out towards the mountains in the west. So I was really excited to see them. They're probably not going to breed. They're probably migrants that are just stopping by and heading out. But it was neat to see them. I never get tired of seeing wood thrush. Here's another bird that was photographed, and I didn't put down the location for this one. I could probably find it. I think this was from Tennessee. If I were to scroll around and find it, Greg, this is one that seemed to cause a lot of problems, and this is sort of an issue with photographs, looking at a single photograph versus looking at a series of photographs or a bird in the field. Identifying birds from photographs does feel like a different skill sometimes, but this is another kind of
it
difficult
is.
one. It's looking awfully reddish, isn't it?
It is, but it's got a very obvious eye ring.
It does.
I would want to see another picture of this bird.
That's
and
from Virginia, Southeast Virginia.
to
All
be
right.
to be, I mean, I could make the case for Hermit. I could make the case for Swensons. Even given what I just said a moment ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, it looks mostly like Hermit. Now I'm sure there's a lot of people listening
Hermit.
like, oh,
All
that's a
right.
Hermit thrush. What are you even talking about it for? And it most likely is a Hermit thrush because it does.
Whoops.
See, I can't. It's just it shows it looks too red to be a Swainson's, and I
So
don't. And but you see, it's you can't really see the
we need
color
more. Need to see more.
here because of the way the head's turned and but I'm not seeing any buffy tones. So I mean, the more I talk about it, the more it just keeps coming back to Hermit.
That's interesting. The consensus in the group was Swainsons.
I'm just not seeing it. And
Hmm.
but if we got a couple other pictures and it proved it to be a Swainson's,
Yeah.
um, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I can't see enough on this bird to be feel slam dunk about it.
Fair enough. My impression was Swainson's. I like the spectacles on this bird. I like the kind of buffy flanks on this bird. And there is, you talked about olive backed Swainsons. There's also a russet backed Swainsons as well. That
Yeah,
is more red than you think. And actually, in the western part of the continent, the confusion species for Swanson's thrush is not necessarily Veery. I think it is Hermit Thrush because it is. There's some
right.
Swensons and Hermit Thrushes that look very similar. But this is in Southeast Virginia, so Norfolk area. But yeah, that's a tough one. My impression was Swainson's. A lot of people were saying Veery, but
No, it's not a
Hermit is in
very
there's it's not a Veery. That was my
no.
not with that eye ring.
Yeah, and the spotting the way it is on the breast and just
Yeah,
everything
Veery is
and
just
Veery.
real concentrated, like right there on the chin.
Yeah,
Very
and
little.
we'll talk about
Let's
Veery
talk
here
about
in a
that actually.
second.
And I'm going to throw
Um,
this other image up. The next one,
okay,
the composite that you made,
yeah.
Greg. This is the same bird, right?
This is the same bird.
Not the same
One
bird of the
second
image we had
apart.
before, but these two pictures
No,
in the composite are
yes,
of the same individual bird.
correct.
Yeah.
And I just put them together in Photoshop to show how thrushes, but any bird, but in particular thrushes, can really change their appearance just by fluffing up their feathers,
Yeah.
and how single pictures can be very misleading. Um, and Also notice that Veery, it's that coppery color is kind of unique,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Foxy
it's so
red,
you've
I
got
think it's called.
it's got a very plain face and that coppery foxy
Mm-hmm.
color, and the lightly spotted breast is pretty unique. And once you get familiar with them, you don't confuse Veery with too much.
Yeah. Yeah, and Very is I don't know. I always sort of hesitate to give birds like human to describe like human emotions or image or whatever for birds, but Very always looks like a very gentle face, and I think that when I say
Yeah,
that, what I'm talking about is that there's not a lot going on that face, like not a lot in the
yes,
way of an eye ring, not a lot in the way of that kind of jawline, ear line thing that you were talking about with Swainson's. I mean, it is very plain, and
yep.
that in combination with the red, which depending on the light, can be easier or more difficult to see. But
And there are
usually you can get that.
variations,
Yeah.
and there are variations with Veeries too. I mean, there are some Veeries that aren't this red,
Hmm.
or and they're a more olivey tone or brown, but they still look like this. They
Yeah.
have that big black eye and that open face, and like you said, a gentle expression.
Yeah.
Um, and then I guess while we're still talking about thrushes, we could just talk about Swainsons and Gray Cheek, which are Gray
I'm
Cheeks are on
gonna
their way.
I'm gonna put
Oh,
a
you're
pin
gonna
on
back
that
up?
for a second,
Okay.
just so I can add something to this PowerPoint without it like showing me actually adding it, so you see like the sausage being made. So I'm going to
Sure.
switch back over to just you and I, and we're going to take a questions here. John Vasallo asks, with the lousy weather on the East Coast, when do you expect migration to peak? Do you have an answer for that, Greg?
Well, it depends on where you are,
Yeah.
latitude wise. Spring migration birds are they're on a timer. They're on
Yeah.
the clock, and you know years of watching radar and trying to like pick that day for a big day that I did for many years. Um, you find that for me in Chicago, in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, Ohio, May 15th is it's it. That is the day.
Yeah.
And as you get closer to or further away from that day, um, it can vary. And of course, there's always one year that's kind of crazy for one reason or another.
Yeah.
But generally,
Yeah.
um,
So where I am, it's
but
about like May 7th. May
yeah,
5th
and
to May
and
7th is like that's the time. And as you say, like weather plays such an important role in that. Like a few years ago, in the biggest week up in Northwest Ohio, they had a nasty, persistent front that was just sitting right on top of Ohio, and so
that
everything
was that
south
was
of
my
it.
first that was my first and only experience at Biggest Week.
Yeah, that was a weird year because everything south of that front was just like popping. Like there was a ton going on. Like birders were finding everything, but everything north of it was just like dead because all the birds that were still
Yeah,
there had headed north, and they had
right.
left us. They had left nothing behind, and you knew that once that front dissipated or moved off, like it
Yeah,
was going to be like you know like a clogged bottle of ketchup or something. And you squeeze too hard,
it
and
was.
like bam, everything was gonna come
And,
out all at once, and that's
and
exactly what
that's
happened.
precisely what happened. And
Yeah.
that week that I was there for 10 days, and it was 45 degrees and
Yes,
sleeting with
that was my very
howling
first
winds the
biggest
whole
week
time.
experience. Yeah.
And I remember we were standing in the parking lot, like trying to get stuff um, into the Mommy Bay Lodge for the ABA booth,
Hmm.
and a common loon trying to fly down the lake just
That's
got
right.
blown right into the building, and
Yeah.
just, and they're fairly powerful flyers.
Totally.
And it just like it had no chance against this weather.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is that when you get closer to the peak wherever you are, um, the birds just say screw it when the weather gets bad and they go. Now that week
Yeah.
was unusual because nothing could fly in it, but I've seen warblers and things fly against a north wind when you look at the map and say, boy, I don't think it's going to move. But they do
Yeah.
because they're on a timer.
They
They
have
know
to.
it.
They have to get up there. They have to get
And
on territory. They have to defend that. If they're too late, another bird that might have taken a different route, it's going to take that territory.
Yep,
Like they have a certain set amount of time, and that's
yep.
in opposition to fall
And in the
migration where they're just like
exact
they'll just take their time. If there's food, they'll stick
birds
around. If there's not, they'll
linger and
move. Yeah,
yep.
yeah. All right, so let's go back to some. Let's go back to some thrushes. Thank you for allowing me to add one more picture to our image, and it is. I'll send it to you, Greg, while you talk about this one, so you can see it as well. But yeah, we were talking about Swensons versus gray-cheeked. We're still a tad on the early side of gray-cheeked migration, so it's the beginning of the curve. They will probably peak in another few days across much of the eastern part of the continent. But Swensons and gray-cheeked is sort of a classic one. Although I will note that
Which
Brody.
image do you have up now? I
I
can't
have
see
the
it.
image of the Swanson's warbler, no, the Swanson's thrush, and the gray-cheeked thrush.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I mean, and there you can see the difference. The gray cheek is on the right, um, and again, you see that buffy on the neck like a cowl, and the bright
Hmm.
eye ring of Swainson's, and the gray cheek is just very plain dark. Again, kind of open, gentle face.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that really stands out to me with those two birds, more than just about anything, is the color of the back, which you would think does might change based on the lighting, and it does a little bit, but for the most part,
Mhm.
when you're looking at a gray cheek thrush, that very cold gray brown color is super. It stands out a lot, and it makes that face look especially dark. And
Yep.
that is the sort of thing that you will notice quite a bit. And they've got a lot of gray on the flanks too. I mean, the whole bird is just like a very cold gray, um, you know, overcast cloud kind of looking bird.
Yep.
and I'm sending you a link to that other one I added there, Greg. And Brody Talbot, who was recently a guest on the ABA podcast, noticed in the Pacific Northwest, his confusion species is always hermit and Swansons don't frequently get veery. So, yeah, so we're talking about, we have a little bit of an East Coast bias here because both Greg and I are, Greg is in the middle of the continent. That's still technically east as far as the birds are concerned. But, yeah, so veery and Swansons can be difficult, but Swansons and gray cheek can be difficult, and Swansons, obviously Swansons and hermit is a difficult species pair as well. Did you get that picture, Greg?
I think we're looking at a warbler with a leaf across its face. Is that
we are?
one?
I haven't put it up yet, but I'll let you know when we do it. I just wanted to throw it up there because I wanted to hit those hawks first.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I have to go back here.
This is a composite image based on one that was thrown up recently on What's This Bird. Eric Bloomberg notes in the comments that he got his first gray-cheeked thrush yesterday. Yep, they're starting to move through. In another few days, you will probably see more and more and more of them.
Yep.
Yeah. So the bird in the center was a bird that photo that was taken not long ago. This was the image that was put on What's This Bird, and I forgot to I didn't put the dates on any of these. I really should have.
It was recent, and it was, let's see here. It was San Jose, California by Nancy Guys. I think I pronounced that right.
But this is a species pair that's going to be of relevance to anywhere in the lower 48 in southern Canada. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So, what we're looking at here, and ignore the one on the left, but what we're looking at here is a raptor, common raptor you'll see in a lot of urban areas. This is a Cooper's hawk, and the reasons that it is a Cooper's hawk is that, so we're looking at that big old head sticking out the front with a real nice dark cap. You can't really see the pale nape. You can see it just a little tiny bit. It's kind of hard to see it. That's really more of a perched bird kind of field mark. But for the most part, you're looking at a real chunky bowling pin shaped bird with a big long head sticking out the back. And especially this kind of real floofy undertail coverts. That's a real good Cooper's hawk field mark that Sharpshin doesn't show very often, if at all.
And that was the reason for making this comp, is that this time of year, Cooper's hawks are doing their nuptial display, and people see them. I mean, they're now nesting in urban areas all across the ABA area. And when a Cooper's hawk, when they're doing their mating display, they fly in circles, and they fly very slow with this very exaggerated, slow moth-like flight. And sometimes they'll call, sometimes they won't, and they fluff out their undertail coverts, and they look like harriers. The way they fly, they do these big swoops, and you see that big white, what appears to be a rump, but it's not. It's underneath. So there's a harrier there compared with it, so you can see, the harrier's got white on top, not underneath, and it's nowhere near as noticeable as a Cooper's hawk when they're fluffing out their butts. And you also see the difference in the wing shape, especially in the primaries, and the hand. Look at the big, like almost baseball mitt hand of the harrier,
absolutely,
compared to the Cooper's hawk, and then the flat face of the harrier.
Shape of the body is real different too. Cooper's hawk is a very substantial, robust hawk, so it's pretty thick all the way through the body, whereas a harrier, I mean, it's like a kite, like the toy, not necessarily the bird, although they are similar to the bird sometimes. They're like real light, real buoyant in the air, so they're going to be kind of front heavy because that's where all the muscles are, but there's like nothing going on towards the tail, like a comma or an apostrophe, Yeah. Different type of hunting styles, and need different kinds of body shapes.
Absolutely.
So, once again, if you have any questions about birds or bird identification or anything, please let us know in the comments. We are live on YouTube, on Facebook, What's This Bird, and on Twitter. So please let us know. Say hello.
So I got a question.
Go for it.
I got a question in the Illinois group. Tommy Goodwin says he was out birding this morning and was hearing what he believed to be a bobolink. After searching for several minutes, another bird pointed out some swallow. I'm saying another birder, I guess,
Hmm. Hmm.
pointed out some swallows that have very similar sound.
Hmm.
I listened through all my apps but could not find a similar call. Do you know of any other birds that sound similar to a bobolink? No.
No, yeah, that's a very
No.
distinct sound. I believe
Um,
my friend Corey Finger, who wrote the ABA Field Guide to Birds of New York, described it as what was it? He described it as R2D2 on cocaine.
yes, uh, the old description of a bobolink was somebody pulling tape out of a cassette tape while
Yeah,
it's
well,
in play.
no one
It's like,
knows what a cassette tape it is anymore,
exactly,
Greg.
I know. I know. It's what
Yeah,
the
but yeah,
color my beard.
yeah, I know.
But yes, and there is nothing that sounds like a bobolink.
Yeah, and they're
You
moving
know,
in numbers right now. In the last
yeah.
few days, people have been reporting them in North Carolina in all the sort of unplowed fields. It's a great time to go out and see if you can find one. It'd be in a safe manner, of course.
Now tree swallows when they're flying around are very vocal, and
They kind of have a warbly, kind of
they do,
buzzy call as well, but not as sustained as a bobolink for sure.
and not yeah. I mean, bobolink is utterly unique.
Yeah, yeah, great birds. Rob Fanning says it is his favorite bird, and he notes that sometimes barn swallow calls remind me of him. Oh, it's good observation. Thank you for that, Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna throw up that warbler now too because this is a good bird to talk about right now because you know when we talk about warbler migration, it is the males that always come through first. So the males are heading through
Hmm.
first to go wherever they need to go to set up their territories, and the females generally follow a few days later. So if you think that you are noticing a lot of male warblers and not a lot of female warblers these days, well, there's a reason for that. It's because the male warblers are migrating in big numbers right now, and the females kind of come up after that. So this is a female warbler, and it was identified in What's This Bird? I think this was from Florida, and it was identified in What's This Bird as a cerulean warbler, which it sort of superficially resembles. But
Hmm.
this is one that a lot of people are going to be seeing, so it's a good one to kind of talk about a little bit. So
Hmm.
this is a female Blackpool warbler. Looks very different
Yes.
from the male Blackpool warbler with the kind of chickadee-like face and the
Yes.
very black and white streaked body. But there are some things to look out for when you're looking at a bird like this. What do you notice when you notice a female Blackpool warbler, Greg?
Well, one thing, leg color. You
I'm
can
gonna
see
try and
this
blow
bird
this
has
up.
light legs,
Yeah.
and cerulean has dark legs. But the face pattern is you've got this dark malar stripe that you can see is
You can
not
see a little bit, yeah.
it's not obscured by the leaf, but you can see it's got this dark sort of mustache stripe,
Hmm.
and the supercilium, the eyebrow, is not really very bold.
Yeah.
Female and especially young cerulean warblers are most often confused with female and young Blackburnian warblers because they
I can
have
see that.
that
Yeah.
similar bold supercilium
Hmm.
framing a darker auricular. Um, but also, it's springtime, and the female cerulean has that kind of unique aqua
Totally.
kind of
Yeah.
color
Completely
to it
different.
that
Yeah.
is unlike any other of our warblers.
It's
And the
really
male,
cool.
they're both different color. I mean, the male
Yeah.
and female are both uniquely colored.
Hmm.
But even in this light, this bird has a gray back,
Yeah.
and overall is just kind of gray and black.
Hmm.
Whereas cerulean, I wish I had time to put together a quick comp, but
Oh yeah. Maybe next
the
time.
base color of a cerulean is very different.
Yeah. Yeah. The pattern, like Greg said, the pattern is similar, but the color is going to be very different. Blackpool warbler, one of the great bird migrations on in the Americas. And I can't just say North America because they winter in northern South America and they practically migrate over the water, at least in the fall, over the Atlantic Ocean, all the way straight down from like Massachusetts or the Mid Atlantic states, all the way down to northern South America in one go. It's pretty remarkable. But in
Oh,
the spring, they
they,
kind of hopscotch up the Caribbean and they end up in Florida. So if you're on the East Coast, actually anywhere on the eastern part of the continent, Blackpool warbler is going to be coming through in decent numbers right about now and for another week and a half or so.
yeah, I mean, they if I believe. Um, because the world is just a blur these days. I don't know what day it is or who I
It's
am
Friday,
anymore.
Greg.
Yeah, but I believe that tag wearing Blackpool Warblers have been confirmed to be flying from the Maritimes, like Nova Scotia and
Yeah,
Newfoundland, over the Atlantic to the northern coast of South America in one fell, just one
yeah,
flight.
yeah. Connecticut
And
Warblers do
speaking
the
of
same
one
thing. It's
flight,
crazy.
um, yesterday I saw, or maybe it was this morning, I saw a satellite tagged bar-tailed godwit that had
Hmm.
been wintering in North Korea, took off and flew across the Pacific and hit some storms. And rather than flying up the coast to Alaska, across the Pacific, up the middle, it got blown across and went completely across and then up and landed in Southeast Alaska.
Oh,
Um,
so it went like to the British Columbia or Washington and Oregon, and then hung a
instead of
left.
going north, it went across and then up. But again, they do that without stopping, and I don't know. It's
Yeah.
probably, I would guess, 4 days, 5 days
The,
of flying without stopping.
they go through some pretty intense physiological changes to
Yeah,
accommodate that sort of thing as well. I think that, and perhaps someone in the comments can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like their entire digestive system actually shrinks, and then once they land, it like regrows so that they're
yeah,
saving weight. I mean, it's just bird migration is pretty wild
yeah.
if you stop to think about it for more than
They are
maybe 15 seconds or so. It's
they
pretty
are
wild
not
that they're
like
doing this.
us. I
Yeah,
mean,
no,
the things that birds do are we cannot.
cannot
I mean,
comprehend.
we can understand it, but we can't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see. We are getting to about 45 minutes of doing this. So if anyone has any questions, please let us know in the comments. You can hit us on Periscope, on YouTube, on Facebook. We're trying to be as accommodating as we can to all of your social media needs to reach you wherever you are. Here's Frank Lehman has a good question. Personal preference question. What is your favorite Thrush song?
Hmm. I mean, well, yeah, I think most people would say wood thrush,
Thrush has a great song.
because it's phenomenal. Um, but I really like hearing Veery's.
Yeah.
Veery has this ethereal flute that just kind of goes up and gets lost in the ether. Um, and it's just very, very pretty and very sublime.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on Very. Very is one of my favorites. They did we hear them up in the Appalachians and the high parts of the Appalachians. They breed up there, and it's very neat. I used to have Swanson's Thrush as my ringtone on my phone, um,
Hmm.
which was always sort of a pleasant sound whenever someone called me.
And
But
that's another song that twirls up,
yeah,
and just
it's
kind
those
of
twirly ones. Those are
vaporizes.
so
Yep.
good. Yeah, but I think the ultimate kind of twirly song, I have to agree with you, is the Very, just because I don't think they have any like pure tones in that song like Swensons or Grey Cheeked have. Like
Right.
it's just like like a
Yeah.
swirly
Now,
kind of chrome. Yeah, it's really something.
for those of you who don't know, the way that thrushes do this is it was discovered not all that long ago. Um, but thrushes have two separate larynxes, one attached to each lung, and they can control them independently. So what they're doing when they're singing is they're harmonizing with
With
themselves.
themselves. Yeah.
So one larynx, the left is singing one part of the song and the right is singing the other part of the song simultaneously. And that's how they get that flute-like rolling sound,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
pretty flippin' amazing when you think about it.
Yeah. Will Broussard asks a question: what altitude do most songbirds migrate at? Do you know that offhand? I know it depends on what species, but
It
I want to
it
say
does 3 to 5 thousand feet
that's yeah,
is about average.
yeah. Some of them get real high. The classic example is bar-necked goose in Asia that can migrate, over the Himalayas but most of our birds don't do that. But yeah, 3,000 to 5,000 feet, still plenty high. It's about a mile up
Oh yeah.
at the top. So yeah, which is why when you're looking at the radar, the Doppler radar, it's sort of, you get those blooms instead of like a constant bird migration, because that's when it picks them up when they are leaving the ground. So the Doppler radar only works at a certain level, the level that most weather causing clouds are going to be at. And so when the birds are flying through that level, that's about where it picks them up. And then when they get too high for that, that's when the blooms kind of dissipate and you don't see them anymore until they start coming back down.
Yeah, I mean, and a good way to kind of think about. I'm looking for a piece of paper here if I have one. Um, I can do this. Nah, it's not big enough. But anyways, think of the radar. What the radar sees as a cone,
Mm-hmm.
and so the radar is viewing through a cone, and as the birds fly through it, they get picked up, and then they disappear when they fly past that cone.
Yep. All right, so we are at 50 minutes. You're welcome, Will. We are here. We aim to please here at the ABA. I'm going to do a little pitch here. If you're interested in joining the American Birding Association, if you enjoy these sorts of features and other things, other free resources that the ABA provides to the birding community, please consider joining the ABA at aba.org/join. We have regular memberships and e-memberships if you prefer to get your if your magazines online. If you don't need them mailed to you, e-membership is a great option. But you can get more information at aba.org/join, and help us out. Join the ABA. Make a small donation if you like. We're certainly.
So I mean, you think about it, we have a lot of great content online, and some of it is members only, and we will be doing more member only content as we go forward. But supporting the ABA is at the digital level is $2.50 a month. It's a cup of coffee a month, and it really helps us keep doing this stuff and churning out the magazines and all the podcast and all the things we do.
Yep.
And we appreciate it very
Andrew
much.
Cameron has another good migration question. If the birds are migrating that high up, what is going on when people listen to nocturnal flight calls in migration? And I think the answer to that is you're basically just picking up the birds that are relatively low, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you can hear birds at great distances for one thing. But yeah, I mean, it's say average, 2 to 5,000 feet or 3 to 5,000 feet. There's a lot of birds that are lower, and particularly earlier in the evening, and later in as we get closer to morning, they're going up and they're coming down. So, if you're out at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, it's still kind of early and they're still kind of low. They're still kind of moving low. And same thing in the morning. If you're there out, before dawn, you're hearing birds that are coming down.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So the best time to listen for nocturnal flight calls is that area right before dawn, correct?
Yeah. The dark before dawn.
Yeah. Or, right when right when the sun has gone down and they're taking off and making those contact calls. Yeah. Although, our colleague Ted Floyd likes to go out at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning and pick up migrating, what is it, Brewers sparrows or chipping sparrows? I forget.
Yeah, I mean, if you have equipment that can pick up the sounds, you can hear a lot. I mean, I think people have used a microphone in a pickle bucket aimed up at the sky to amplify the calls.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things you can do to do that. I know you can find a lot of that do-it-yourself stuff in various Facebook groups or online.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done it, so I couldn't tell you how well it works.
I haven't tried the pickle bucket trick either. Jennifer Johnson in the Illinois group asks, do Baltimore Orioles return to the same feeders like hummingbirds do? I would guess to a certain degree they do. Mm-hmm. Birds learn locations, and I think that they do come back when they find a reliable food source. They remember where
that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but Yeah. I mean, speaking. This is purely anecdotal. My
Yeah.
dad he puts oranges out for the Orioles in the spring, and they come back every year. Once they've kind of established, where there's food, it's probably the same. It's probably the same birds, and then birds are very visually oriented, so that if they see another bird taking advantage of a food resource, they're going to remember where that is, and they're going to use it as well, and that kind of builds on itself. Yeah. All right. If anyone has any other questions, please let us know. Otherwise, Greg, I think we're getting close to 2 o'clock, so we're probably going to
Yeah, we
call
are.
it a day. Let me just make one more run around the social media things and make sure that everyone is. Uh, if there are any questions I'm missing, check Periscope real quick. Nope.
And do you
Well,
have a uh-huh?
no, go ahead.
No, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say goodbye, but if you've got something
Oh,
else.
well, I was just gonna say, what's the next virtual bird club? Do we have one
Oh, yeah,
coming
we
up?
do. So, Robin Bailey from Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Nest Watch program is going to be with us for the Virtual Bird Club next Wednesday at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. She's going to give a talk about identifying nests and just nesting birds in general. It should be a really great program. I'm actually going to start promoting that as soon as we get
So
off here. So,
so is that Wednesday? That's Wednesday night, the 6th?
Wednesday the 6th at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the ABA's social media channels. So here on Twitter/Periscope, YouTube, and the ABA's main Facebook page, which is just American Birding Association on Facebook. You'll be able to find
And
it there.
virtual bird club, for those of you who aren't familiar, isn't like this just Nate and I bantering. This is like a real presentation by somebody who
Yes,
knows what they're talking about.
exactly. Not
and
just stuff
and
there.
they have a, like, you were at a bird club meeting and you have a speaker that you've come to see, except it's on your computer, and they've been really wonderful, and they've been a lot of fun.
They've been great. We've gotten a lot of really good responses from both from the people who have enjoyed watching them and from the people who have enjoyed giving those presentations. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been great. So hopefully some of you will make some time next Wednesday night to check it out. We'll be promoting it in all our groups. So you'll be able to see all that stuff.
Right on.
All right. So yeah, thanks for reminding me about that, Greg. But I think we can call it an afternoon. We will see you all next week. 1 p.m.
Yep.
here in the What's This Bird group and across the ABA's entire social media uh, empire, I guess, for lack of a better word. But yeah, you'll be able to find us next week around this time. If you have any bird questions, let us know. We'll probably be talking migratory birds. Greg, I think this was the first time we've done these where we haven't talked about larkwire.
Oh, damn.
I know, right?
All right, we'll make up
We'll
for it
make
next
up for it
time.
next time. Anyway, yeah, we'll see y'all next week, 1 o'clock here in the What's This Bird group. Thanks, everybody.
See ya. That was good. That was good. Okay, I will see